Okay, let's call the meeting back to order. Please begin.
Okay. So I live in South Salinas, and my neighbor across the street, his name is Steve Costa. And he and his wife at the time bought an old historic house in Salinas on Central Avenue. And he said it was so decrepit that one of the walls actually, the front wall actually fell into the front yard. But his wife was adamant about taking this old house and restoring it somewhere on Central Avenue downtown Salinas. So eventually I'll figure out where it is, take photos, just for my own edification. But what's interesting and what ties into Redmond House is that his wife wanted to buy the Redmond House. This is 20+ years ago. This is before the new hotel. This is before the new owner. And I think at that time it was the son of the family. Anyway, he had the opportunity to sell, but they didn't want to sell. And they were gonna go into it and restore the whole thing.
Perhaps the family held on to some old idea that they would eventually restore it themselves. And that was impractical when they looked at the costs,
Yeah.
or maybe they never got to even look at the costs.
Yeah.
Was that before the foundation was formed? Because there was a foundation formed that bought, was in the process of buying it, and they couldn't keep up the payments.
It must have been before then,
Uh-huh.
yeah, cause the foundation thing, I think, was probably 10, 15 years ago, possibly. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't remember it.
More than 10.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, there you go. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thank you very much for
Would
that.
Mr. Costa's wife be interested in buying this from the Tuck family now and restoring it?
No, not in the condition that it's in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so, the Redmond, will continue to remain, an ongoing item that we will refer to as we go through time and, as long as it remains unresolved. Okay, thank you very much. Item 9D, a report from the subcommittee on the new banner. I think we just finished that up. The new banner, it's gonna be a nice medium blue with white, font, which is in high contrast, and you can see it from a distance. It's gonna have the two logos, simple and to the point. We will probably be purchasing, an accompanying tablecloth, for, an 8-foot table. And, we may have some miscellaneous expense in, minor accessories, that would go with the banner in maintaining a booth. So there we have it. We will be able to keep the cost within the budget of $250, and we will have it completed in time for the history fair, on the 18th of, May. Yes.
Is where's the location of the history fair
The
this year?
history fair is located at the, Mission Santa Cruz this year.
Oh, cool.
We're just moving into it as the next agenda item, and I'm trying to
Oh, perfect.
pull my one pager. Bear with me, friends. Aha. Okay, we have paid a $30 admission for the fair. I sent a personal check. I will Matthew, I'm going to make it as easy as possible and to try to submit all cash expenses in one swoop with detail. And I recognize that we're not even sure what the protocol is to get repaid, but it'll work out. I have no concerns about it. There's $30 for our membership. We get one table. They're having something that they're calling a passport to the past this year. And the passport to the past means that your booth is on a designated list, and that guests who are doing the passport will stop at your booth and you have some brief interaction with them. There may be a question for them to ask you, and you have the answer to the question. Okay, and they're able to write that on their passport and they turn it in, and it's a little game that keeps people amused and circulating. So The fair, the fair is from 12 to 4. We have one table. It's gonna be located at the Santa Cruz Mission. And we need to staff that thing. I know that Linda has some interest in being there. And I think that Lucia told me that she would like to be there also. It's only 4 hours altogether, and it's basically schmoozing. But we need a theme. We need to have an idea of something we can talk to them about. We don't have a good brochure to give out. Okay? It might be a good idea to have a brief one-pager about the commission. It might even be a half-pager that we can just have a little pile of. And I can write that. I'll prepare a half-pager. For us to be able to give out. As we discussed at our last meeting, our full charter includes that we're supposed to have a document to hand out to the public that talks about the commission and what it does and what opportunities it presents. And we just don't have such a document, and it probably won't appear right now. But I think we can sub it with something that can look just fine. I'll do it on heavy stock and just make it easy to do. But we still need to have a little subcommittee that will think about the fair and move forward with the details of which hour is who working it. Where do we get the tablecloth? Just help tie in. Lucia and I are finishing the banner. Once we have the banner, we'll buy the tablecloth. But we need a little subcommittee that can work on this. Emily, would you be interested in that kind of thing?
Sure.
Grant,
A subcommittee to determine who's gonna be where at what time?
how would I say this? Oversee the execution of our fair booth. Just be the point person.
Good.
And normally I would just grab onto it, but I've got a bunch of other things in front of me right now. So Emily, and we can have a telephone conversation about that and kind of name a few things that we want to do and just I'll get it into motion.
What time does the fair start?
The fair is from noon to 4.
Okay.
The attendance last year, I'm gonna tell you that I think that there were between 300 and 400 people there. So at a given moment, there could be no one at your booth, or there can be 2 or 3 people at your booth. That's kind of how it is.
I've done it in the past for the Aptos History Museum when I was down at Seacliff, and it was fun. It was actually a lot of fun. They've done
You
that.
talk to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Let me just share with you what we did last year, okay? Last year, Annie provided us with 8 historical photographs of different locations in Santa Cruz County. And those locations were on a board, okay? With their name, okay? And, we had a sheet for people to pick up that had one question about each photograph. So here's a perfect example. We had a photograph of the Davenport jail. Okay, and the question was, how many incarcerated people were there in the history of the jail?
0.
2.
2.
In 22 years, they jailed 2 people. So, it's just a point at which it creates a laugh.
Yeah.
It creates a reflection. You've genuinely told them something that they never even thought about, let alone knew. And it's just fun.
So what does that mean? It means the criminals got away, or it means there's not much criminal activity in that area at that time? Or Or they took them straight to Santa Cruz for the
I'm thinking that there were two that were late at night
drunks.
and drunk. And it's just better to toss them in the closet.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's about the size of a closet.
no, they actually, I don't know who, I don't recall who they be, but, there was consideration of picking it up and moving it over the hill. And then somebody realized, oh, wait a second, this is solid concrete.
Yeah.
Got a 2 foot thick slab of concrete and the
Yeah.
walls are 18 inches thick and.
Yeah. We're lucky to have the Orlandos, now second generation with Lucia, on our commission because they are, very long-time residents. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Alberta told me that her family moved there when she was 4 years old. Wow. So, and she is now 93 years old.
Did that import?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, in Alberta, Lucia's mom, about 6 years ago, wrote the history book of this town of Davenport.
Yeah.
That sold at the museum.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll wrap this up by saying we have our subcommittee with Emily, regarding the history fair, and we'll contact everybody, and we hope you can all join us for a little while. If we share it, it's really light and easy, and, we'll come up with a theme, and there we have it.
I would like to volunteer my time too. I've helped in the past.
Thank you.
Alberta there. I held the jail bars in front of me and I got a group.
Now, that's,
A lot of people must think you
you
got.
better be careful, because that's a different booth. You might be recruited by her for that booth.
It was her, it was the commission's booth that, we did that for. So, anyway, I would like to help in any capacity.
Great,
That's great. Thank
great.
you.
Do we have your telephone contact?
I can provide it now.
Let's grab.
My telephone number is 831
Uh-huh.
685-2915. That's a home landline. I don't have a cell phone.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Thank you. I'd be honored.
You're very unusual.
I am, in love.
You and my best friend Ukulele Dick are the only two people I know that don't have cell phones. And his answer is, that's because I'm Ukulele Dick. And you can say, that's because I'm Becky Steinberg. All right, thank you. We can complete, the history fair report in item E. F, update on ordinance for demolition permits.
I can tell you that, I started on it and then I put it on the back burner. And, I'll be diving back into it again.
Okay,
And the whole approach is to get as many of the ducks lined up as possible. And then, before I move it into a position where it would be considered by the planning commission, I want to make sure that our department is 100% behind it.
I think that's the
That could
way
be
to go.
2 weeks, that could be 2 months, that could be 6 months.
Absolutely. Keep us informed as it develops. Okay? And if you've got something for us to put on next meeting's agenda, we will. And if there is no progress, then we'll keep it off next week.
And it's not just demolition permits, it has to do with demolition by neglect.
Indeed. An important resource that needs to be further developed that will be very empowering. May I add that there is another element that you might add, I think belongs adjacent to it, and that would be the concept, and you'll see why this goes along with it, the concept of delisting a property. Does that seem to fit with you?
I think we have that in our ordinance, don't we?
I think that we have my sense is we have no mechanism for delisting articulated in county code.
Okay.
And that's something that,
Yeah, I can throw everything together.
and let me refer to one perfect example that will come up at our next meeting. now that there is they're not going to rebuild the Alba Schoolhouse.
Right.
So it needs to be taken off of the list.
Right.
And how we do that.
What's there now, just a chimney?
I believe
The
that,
chimney
yeah,
foundation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has to be delisted.
yeah, well, my thought was that they were going to, the first talk about it in the 6 months following was they were going to rebuild it to spec as it originally was. In which case, wow, what would we do with it then? Could we give it a new listing, or is there a special category that it would get, or be an honorarium or whatever? But ultimately, isn't that what historians want? Buildings, destroyed and it is reborn. So, but no, they've determined not to move forward, and it's for budgetary considerations, I believe. It wasn't being used as a schoolhouse, it was being rented out at a very low fee for community events and private parties.
So who was thinking about rebuilding it? The school district?
I believe the school district owned it, and it was a little bit of fun and extra revenue and a go-to place, and teachers in the district could sign it out for the afternoon and take their class there and do fun things with it. And just when they looked at it as a major redo, it was a bigger project than they
Sure.
could accommodate.
Right.
So,
Using prevailing wages.
yeah, well, phew. Okay, so I think that ties in, if you could give us whatever you got, the best update on what delisting status is, and if there's a methodology.
Yeah.
Great, okay,
Question?
yes, sure.
Is it possible at all for there to be some inclusion of language about the, his notification to the Historic Resources Commission so that this commission could at least somehow try to retrieve or make members of the industry or something to retrieve objects of like barnwood from the Harahara barn?
I think that's a, past done deed. And Linda Phillips is closely tied into the project and is vice chair of this commission. So I think we have our watchdog in place for the Alba Schoolhouse for anything.
Oh, I was thinking in general regarding the,
Salvaging materials from a burnt or soon to be demolished structure.
yeah,
What you're talking about?
yeah. I believe in the language,
Well, that can be done, for example, Redmond House, that could be done through the development review process where stipulation that,
All salvageable materials.
yeah, it's best to be specific and not wishy-washy about it. I mean, if you want something salvaged from a particular type of wood, I don't know anything about the Redmond House other than I sit by it at 70 miles an hour. But there may be some very interesting features that haven't been stripped out of it for the last 30 years that are worth salvaging. Banisters, I bet there aren't any.
I think that building's been gone through, but conceptually, you're on to something very real.
Yeah.
Which is that and I think that the place where it belongs is in the, as we're approving the demolition of that.
Yeah.
After the Seabreeze burned down, I heard that they got rid of a lot of stuff before anyone had an opportunity to take a look.
Yeah.
The Seabreeze was being used to store old stuff.
Mhm.
That's what it was being used for. And, yeah, we're not, there'll always be some questions about that interim owner who owned it during the period of time when it burned down.
Right.
He owned the building for less than a year in total, 3 months. He bought the building in January. In March, when he was planning on getting ready to open for summer, we were shut down with COVID in March of 2020.
Yeah.
And somehow there was a fire in the building that wasn't occupied in June of 2020.
Yeah.
And, then the guy, wouldn't do anything after the fire, wouldn't even put up fences around the building
Right.
and sold it in November. So he bought it in January. By November, he sold it and there was a fire in between. Oh, boy, howdy. So, I understand that the spirit of cooperation is strong with the current owner of the property.
Mhm.
But yet nothing's been done.
I remember that, Miss Annie Murphy did attempt to salvage, I think a window or something
Oh,
before
really?
it was demolished,
Yeah,
but the demolition crew took it down before.
It has to be set up well before any demolition crews are being considered.
Right.
There are salvaging companies in the Bay Area. I
Right.
don't know about our area here.
Right.
They may be interested in something like this.
But yeah, just having something on the books, I agree, and this is, some sort of procedure
Mhm.
is good to think of ahead of time, rather than looking back and saying, oh, I wish we could have seen what they hauled away. I heard from several people, there was a lot of cool old items that survived the fire
Mhm.
at the Sea Breeze, and were just sitting in a big pile and were taken away by a dumpster crew, probably, and we lost for
And I think of a lot of that had to do with the, adversarial attitude of the landlord.
Right.
Yeah. He wouldn't even put the fence up until parts of the wall fell down onto the street,
Yeah,
and he was required to
yeah.
by, code. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. So there's completion of our update on the ordinance for demolition permits. We are going to defer goals, and that takes care of the rest of our old business. Under commissioner presentations and informal items, I have one. Does anyone have another one they would like to bring up at this time? Okay, I would like to just address this informally among ourselves. We have been talking about the idea of including routine site visits in between meetings, where we become familiar with the inventory in our individual districts, so that we are increased in our effectiveness and so that we know our turf better. So towards that goal, we had discussed that each commissioner might visit 3 properties between each meeting. Okay, what I discovered upon, this came up when you and I visited the buildings, is we don't have a proper form that commissioners can have. Simple, but I think that if we were to develop a simple site visit form, that would be a good tool for each of us, and that we might be able to activate that concept of having every commissioner make 3 visits during the course of between meetings.
Create a form for follow-up.
And that would happen is you come to the meeting with your filled out forms. Okay, and we build a file of them, and that file goes to whoever is going to be updating the inventory. That becomes a tool that can help update the inventory and gets us all just more familiar. You know, we would be seeing 12 properties a year, because let's put it this way, with 4 meetings a year, we were talking about 3 properties. With 3 meetings a year, I think we should make it 4 properties. So I'm going to recommend that we put an agenda item on for next meeting, where we will deliver the form to you. Matthew, how about you and me brainstorm it out?
Yeah,
And then, starting with next meeting, we'll slightly more formalize that process of site visits.
I think that's very doable. I mean, we spent, what, 2 hours together, and we visited 6 or 7 different sites,
Yeah.
so it's very reasonable.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. And it sure is fun.
It
It's
was.
real nice.
It
It's
is.
real nice. You know, you scan the neighborhood, you just feel, this is my turf. Thank you very much for that. Okay, do we have any staff updates?
Comment.
I just want to add a comment, thanking you for that great idea and ask that those forms be forwarded or to the supervisors and or included in the report that they receive from your commission.
Oh, sure. Good suggestion. We sure want to get credit for all of our genius ideas.
And the importance of your work.
Well, it's also important, I think, to remind the supervisors that what we do is we keep our eye on the historic properties. That can only serve us well. So, okay, and Matthew, is there any other staff updates for today?
None,
Okay, do we have any other written communications?
we do not.
Okay, now, I think we've talked today about some items to go on the next agenda. Does anybody wish to add anything else for the upcoming agenda for the next meeting? Okay, thank you. Matthew, it was so helpful to, have those minutes developed shortly after the last meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I prefer it that way, because everything's fresh in my mind.
And it also helps, us have a transition tool between meetings. Right. I think it's very good. So, if there is no other business of the day, may I call adjournment of the Historic Resources Commission? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you for your good work. Appreciate it. And it was really good to read that, the historic office report that you included.
Matthew, congratulations on the employee recognition.
Oh, right.
Oh, what?
There's a.
The housing